Reliving the Madness is brought to you by OG Sports Brewhouse Pizza, where you can eat pizza, drink beer, and earn rewards. Welcome back to Reliving the Madness. I'm your host, Jon Schaeffer. It is my pleasure to be joined by Mark Zeigler. He covers the Aztecs beat for the Union-Tribune, one of the top beat writers in the country covering college basketball, and is with us right now on your view. And Mark, we appreciate your time. And I want to start when you look back at this season. Was there a moment, you were talking about this early, you said this team had a chance, if everything worked out well, to be one of the better teams in the history of the program. Was there a moment early in the season when you recognized that this might be a group that was capable of making a run?
Yeah, they started really well, and I remember going up to the Stanford game. Nobody's in the arena. It's kind of a dead atmosphere. They're getting ready to go to Maui. They've been talking about Maui for months, for years. I mean, it's a big deal. And now you got this game at a power conference school that's got some pretty talented players, and they just blew the doors off of them. And at that moment, I thought, this team has something. They could do some damage here. And then you have the normal ebbs and flows of a season where, they had a really good win in Maui against Ohio State. And then, they didn't do so well against Arizona late in the game. And then, blew a game against Arkansas and then lost a game a few weeks later to St. Mary's. And that was a little bit of a valley. But the valleys were never really that low with this team. And you just knew they were going to get better. But I think at that moment, I thought, okay, that they've got something here that could really translate in March. And it just took a while to get there and see it.
It's so funny that oftentimes when you talk about like an NCAA tournament draw, you talk about location, region, how advantageous is that? But of course, the matchups are critical as well. So San Diego State, as you know, had to go across country to Orlando, then ultimately Louisville and Houston. When you look back at the fact that they had to travel across the country, what is more impactful? Is it the matchup or is it the location? And obviously with what San Diego State did, it proved to be that the location wasn't as important as the draw they ultimately had and the run they went on.
Yeah, I think, coaches always want everything, right? They want the location and the matchup. But at the end of the day, they'll tell you the matchups are the most important thing. And you hear that all the time. NCAA is about matchups, and it really was this year. I mean, the two teams they got in Orlando couldn't have been better. I thought Charleston was a very good team. Obviously, they won 31 games. But just physically, I didn't think they matched up very well with the Aztecs. And that was going to always be probably the toughest game other than, the game against UConn. That was probably their hardest game just because they were nervous. They hadn't won a game in a while. There's a lot of pressure to win a game. Coach Brian Dutcher hadn't won a game in the tournament as a head coach. And there was just all that stuff there. And they were fortunate they got a team like Charleston where they could have 11 turnovers in the first half and still feel like they were in the game. I think had it been a different matchup, that might have been a really, really tough game. And I think once they won that game, and then they got Furman, which was another good matchup, and it just kept rolling there. And, not to say they couldn't have beat other teams, but it really, really helped them, even though they were across the country. Like you said, they were in a different time zone and there was a lot of adjustment to make there. In the end, the matchups proved more important.
You've covered this program for a decade plus. You look at this senior class. I mean, some of these players weren't here for the entirety of it, like Matt Bradley, but you have Nathan Mensah, Arop, Adam Seiko. How will you remember this class and how replaceable, are these some irreplaceable parts moving forward for Brian Dutcher and his staff?
Well, I remember this class as being just an incredible group of guys. I mean, you usually on a basketball team, they're all college students. They're all, pretty good guys, but they're, so every now and then you'll have, I don't want to say a bad seed, but you'll have a guy who's a little bit of a character issue sometimes. And that's normal on a college basketball team. I mean, you're recruiting talent first. But this was a group that had none of those problems. I mean, and that, comes from the seniors that set the tone. And that's what I'll remember most for, is just having this pretty smooth sailing team where you didn't have any really behind the scenes issues. And that speaks to a guy like, AG and the leadership he brought. I think some of their skill sets will be replaceable. They're very, very good players, but there's also a lot of good players out there. What's going to be the question is whether their leadership, their poise, their drive, their work ethic, their team ethic, all those kind of intangibles, whether you can replace those. And it's not just replacing those, it's replacing those with a guy who's been in the program like Adam Seiko for 6 years and understands the program and can transmit and translate that to new players. And so they're not going to have that sort of safety net of, well, we've got, 6 guys who've been here forever. They're going to lose all those guys. And so there's a little bit of a working without a net and establishing your culture now. And so we'll see how it goes. But I think that's probably what concerns the coaches the most.
Mark, what would it take? I mean, to get San Diego State back, we know it's a special year to get to a Final Four, but when you look at all the headwinds in college basketball, the role that name, image, and likeness plays, the role that conference affiliation could play, retaining a staff, retaining the players on your current roster, what's it going to take, not to put San Diego State back in a Final Four in a year, but to keep this program in a position where they can vie to make deep runs in the tournament for the next 3, 4, 5+ years?
Well, I think they've already done that. And I think the whole key to the NCAA tournament is not creating a super team. Mm-hmm. A lot of, I think, fans have that misunderstanding about how the tournament works. Like we talked about earlier, it's about matchups. And you don't know what those matchups are going to be. And so the only way that you can kind of game the system is to just keep getting there with good teams, not necessarily great teams, but very good teams, and then see how the matchups play out. See if you hit those last second shots. See if you can match up well with a team where you can withstand 5-10 minutes where you're not playing great basketball and still win a game. Those things you can't plan for. So the only thing you can do and the only thing you can control is just keep getting back in the tournament and keep giving yourself chances. And this is what this program has done. I mean, if you look at it, was 11-10 of the last 13 years, it would be 11-14 if they had didn't have the pandemic year in 2020 when it was canceled. They keep going to the tournament. They didn't always win, but they kept knocking on the door. And so I think they're already positioned to do that. And I think that's what fans have to understand. In some years you're gonna hit the lottery, and some years you're not. But eventually they will get back if they keep getting to the tournament. I think that the issue is if you all of a sudden have gaps of 3 or 4 or 5 years, and you look at a program like UNLV, they've gone a long time now. They've gone a decade without being in the tournament. Now that's a different issue. You get to the tournament and it's like you're trying to hit a home run. Where San State can just keep hitting singles, doubles, and eventually they'll hit that home run.
Mark, we've really enjoyed your coverage. I mean, an amazing job in the Union-Tribune this year, along for the ride from day one until it was capped off in that national championship game in Houston against the University of Connecticut. Appreciate you doing it today. Thanks so much.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Again, Mark Zeigler from the Union-Tribune. You're watching Reliving the Madness right here on Your View. Reliving the Madness is brought to you by OG Sports Brewhouse Pizza, where you can eat pizza, drink beer, and earn rewards.